Crowds can transform ordinary individuals into impulsive, unrestrained participants in collective action, both euphoric and violent. When people merge into a mob, identity blurs, responsibility diffuses, emotion intensifies, and moral restraint dissolves. Across history, mobs have executed, condemned, celebrated, rioted, revolted, and destroyed, all with the same psychological engine: the loss of the individual inside the collective. Early human societies often settled disputes through collective confrontation. When one tribe wronged another, retaliation came not from individuals but from the entire community acting as a single emotional organism. Rage, honor, fear, and survival spread instantly through the group, guiding collective violence. This primal phenomenon shows that mob action predates civilization. It is ancient, instinctive, and deeply human. Early cities used mob presence as social control. Public executions, stonings, and spectacles allowed citizens to participate collectively in enforcing moral order. Authorities understood crowds. Witnessing and contributing to punishment unified groups, reinforced cultural norms, and satisfied shared impulses toward retribution. The mob was not accidental, it was engineered into governance. In ancient Rome, emotional contagion reached theatrical heights. The crowd in the Colosseum responded as one body, roaring approval, demanding blood, celebrating death. Gladiator combat created ritualized mob emotion, unity through cruelty. The arena distilled mob mentality into a civic event, a shared emotional intoxication that merged entertainment and savagery. During medieval outbreaks, famine, or unexplained catastrophe, mobs targeted scapegoats: Jews, foreigners, accused witches, or others. Logical analysis was replaced by shared panic. The mob needed a target, not truth. Fear metastasized into collective aggression, with each participant feeling less personally responsible because everyone else was doing it. In 1692, Salem demonstrated how a small, fearful community could spiral into collective hysteria. Children's accusations, unchecked belief, and panic transformed neighbors into enemies. Evidence became irrelevant. Accusation was enough. The mob didn't just punish, it manufactured guilty identities to justify itself. In Paris, revolutionary mobs became forces of political destiny. The storming of the Bastille showed how a mass of ordinary citizens could topple institutions through sheer unified aggression. Later, crowds demanded heads for the guillotine, shouting in unison as ideology fused with fervor. Individuals disappeared. The mob became history's actor. Across Europe, ethnic and religious minorities suffered mob violence sanctioned by silence or complicity. These eruptions were not random. They were socially permitted. The mob channeled collective prejudice into physical force, with brutality escalating as each person felt shielded by the crowd's anonymity. In the United States, lynchings became communal rituals of racial terror, attended by spectators who viewed themselves as enforcers of social order. Photographs show smiling participants beside corpses, proof that when morality dissolves into mob righteousness, cruelty becomes normalized. The mob rewrites violence into virtue. In 1895, Gustave Le Bon argued that individuals within crowds regress psychologically, becoming more impulsive and primitive. Emotional contagion becomes a kind of behavioral sink, one sentiment spreading across hundreds. Le Bon warned that leaders could exploit this by guiding mobs through suggestion, symbolism, and dramatic emotional cues. Milgram's findings showed that ordinary people will inflict harm when assured someone else takes responsibility. What's crucial for mob psychology is that this same diffusion of responsibility grows exponentially when multiplied across a crowd. The shift from "I did this" to "we did this" enables individuals to bypass personal guilt and enter a shared psychological state of suspended moral judgment. Not all mob mentality is destructive. Collective joy can also override individuality. In festivals, concerts, religious ecstasy, and celebrations, people report a feeling of merging with the group. Identity loosens, emotion amplifies, and personal restraint disappears. The same psychological mechanism behind riots can also produce unified joy and catharsis when directed toward connection instead of confrontation. Hitler mastered the engineering of mob identity through spectacle. Choreographed marches, synchronized chanting, and monumental architecture transformed individuals into components of a collective organism. In such massive crowds, personal doubts evaporated as emotional unanimity surged. Ideology did not merely persuade, it possessed. Fascist rallies in Italy showed similar use of spectacle. The leader performed dominance, the crowd performed allegiance. Participation became identity. To be Italian was to comply with nationalist fervor. Collective emotion acted as a reaffirming mirror. People saw unity from outside and felt unity inside, reinforcing conformity. During World War II, Japanese society became a synchronized unity of sacrifice and loyalty. The individual was subordinate to the national body, a moral fusion of citizen and state. Shame-based conformity amplified the mob effect. Disobedience was dishonor. In such frameworks, violence committed for the group becomes reframed as duty rather than choice. In China, millions of students joined movements to publicly shame, punish, and attack intellectuals and class enemies. It was textbook mob identity formation, ideological idealism fused with youthful fervor, dissolving personal judgment. Participants later claimed they were swept by collective momentum, evidence of how ideology can override conscience when amplified across an entire generation. Modern sports events provide controlled outlets for tribalism. But when rivalry escalates, fans can transform into violent mobs. Personal restraint is replaced by loyalty to colors, teams, and belonging. Victories spark mass joy. Defeats spark destruction. The game becomes merely a catalyst. The real fuel is identity merged into collective emotion. Social media has created a new mob, decentralized, instantaneous, anonymous. People join pile-ons, cancellations, and coordinated outrage with the same psychological detachment found in physical mobs. The screen acts as emotional armor. Cruelty feels like participation rather than aggression. The result: reputations destroyed by collective impulse. Inside a mob, the sense of I weakens as we dominates. Behavior becomes guided by emergent group norms rather than personal ethics. Crowd emotion becomes viral. Anger spreads faster than reason, excitement faster than caution. Morality becomes collective, and often irrational. Individuals are not inherently violent, but crowds can be. People in mobs believe the blame is diluted, that guilt is shared or erased. Yet history shows otherwise. After every mob-driven atrocity, accountability eventually narrows back to individuals. The crowd may feel invincible in the moment, but consequences are always solitary. Mob psychology is powerful but not exonerating. Psychologists describe mob behavior as de-individuation, where self-awareness diminishes and emotional instincts dominate. People become less concerned with judgment, morality, or future consequences. This mental state invites impulsive action. The brain shifts from, "What do I think?" to, "What is happening around me?" The crowd provides both permission and cover. In groups, emotions act like viruses. Excitement multiplies, anger intensifies, fear amplifies. One scream becomes 10, one shove becomes a stampede, one accusation becomes a frenzy. Neurologically, humans mimic emotional cues, eye contact, vocal energy, posture, spreading effect before logic even engages. The crowd becomes a storm of mirrored emotion. Mobs rarely lack leadership. They are guided not by rational speakers but by emotional amplifiers. The loudest, angriest, or most passionate individual becomes the compass. When authority merges with the mob, whether ideological, religious, or political, the crowd's force becomes weaponized. A leader doesn't command, they ignite. Politicians still use crowd psychology to simulate consensus and momentum. Large rallies demonstrate support visually, influencing undecided observers through perceived popularity. The spectacle itself becomes persuasion, creating the illusion that everyone supports a cause, making resistance feel abnormal. Mob behavior even emerges in economics. Scarcity-driven shopping events turn rational adults into frantic competitors. Shoppers push, trample, and fight, not because they need the object, but because the crowd's intensity reframes acquisition as survival. The product becomes secondary, participation becomes primary. News amplification and sensational narratives turn isolated incidents into perceived societal threats. Once fear takes root, mobs can form without physical proximity. Ideology itself becomes the gathering point. Media doesn't create mobs, but it accelerates emotional synchronization, making outrage scalable and instantaneous. Resistance requires strong internal identity, unwavering personal principles that outweigh social pressure. Those who step out of the mob feel physical isolation and psychological risk, yet they anchor moral perspective. History remembers these individuals not as spectators, but as those who preserved humanity when crowds abandoned it. Mobs also fuel revolutions and collective liberation when used to counter oppressive systems. From civil rights marches to anti-dictatorship uprisings, united masses have challenged entrenched injustices. Mob energy is not inherently immoral, it is morally ambiguous. It magnifies whatever sentiment dominates the group, for better or worse. As online networks blend with real-world organization, the next evolution of mob mentality will be hybrid. Digital outrage will mobilize physical action. Virtual identity will reinforce real-world conformity. The crowd will exist everywhere and nowhere, algorithmically curated, emotionally synchronized, and increasingly unpredictable. Mob mentality reveals a paradox. Humans seek individuality, yet in groups we surrender it willingly. Understanding this shift, from self to swarm, helps us recognize when collective emotion overpowers reason. This channel exists to explore those psychological forces shaping history and human behavior. If you want to keep uncovering the mind behind society's darkest and brightest moments, subscribe for more.